I remember the exact moment I stood there in the dim hallway of our suburban split level, the kind of house that looks perfect from the street, but echoes with unspoken regrets inside. It was well past midnight and the air hung heavy, like the world outside had forgotten to breathe. My bare feet pressed against the cool hardwood, sending a shiver up my spine that had nothing to do with the chill. Behind that closed door, in the room at the end of the hall, he was alone. I could sense it, the way you sense a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. And in that suspended quiet, I faced a fork in the road, turned back to the empty king-sized bed where my husband lay oblivious, or twist that brass knob and step into whatever shadows waited on the other side. You ever get that prickling sensation? Like the house itself is watching, waiting for you to make the wrong move? That's how it felt. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked like a heartbeat, slow and relentless, matching the pulse thundering in my ears. I hadn't gone hunting for this complication, I promise you that. But isolation has a way of whispering temptations, turning the hush of an empty home into a siren's call. For weeks he'd barricaded himself in there after dark, no glow from a screen, no murmur of music leaking through the walls. Just an impenetrable void. At first, I chalked it up to sorrow, the raw kind that claws at you after losing someone vital. I murmured to myself that he just needed space, that time would stitch the wounds. But as the night stretched on, a subtle shift crept in, like the air growing thicker, charged with secrets. That evening, though, something tugged at me harder. Maybe it was the way the floorboards had creaked under my steps earlier, or the faint sliver of amber light seeping from beneath his door, pulsing like a distant flame. I didn't rap my knuckles against the wood. Didn't call out his name. I just lingered, palm flat against the smooth panel, as if I could feel the warmth of whatever solitude he was wrestling with on the other side. Part of me screamed to retreat, to slip back into the routine of pretending everything was fine. But the honest ache? I wasn't just worried about him anymore. I was chasing a spark of my own, a flicker of being truly acknowledged in a life that had grown so achingly vacant. I'm 42 now, tethered to a marriage that gleams on the surface but crumbles under scrutiny. We have the tidy two-story in Evergreen Heights, the reliable SUV in the driveway, and Alex, my husband, who brings home a solid income from his corporate gigs. To the neighbors, we're the picture of stability. But behind these beige walls, it's a hollow shell. Alex believes punching the clock and depositing checks equates to partnership. He's perpetually airborne for meetings or buried in his tablet when he's under this roof. Our exchanges? They're logistics, not intimacy. Rent reminders, meal plans, flight schedules. We used to share stolen glances that promised forever, lazy Sundays tangled in sheets. But the grind eroded it all, his promotions, my unfulfilled dreams of something beyond homemaking. Or perhaps he simply stopped truly seeing me, stopped tracing my skin like I was a treasure worth savoring. I quit probing for answers, settling into the void, the unoccupied half of the mattress, the clatter of solo dishes in the sink, the way laughter used to echo here but now feels like a memory from another life. Then Ethan arrived. Alex's son from his first union, 21, and carrying the weight of the world on his lanky frame. After his mother's sudden passing, a brutal highway collision that stole her in an instant, he'd bounced between relatives, crashing at his uncle's until university pulled him back to our town. Alex floated the idea of him bunking with us to cut dorm costs, and how could I argue? It seemed compassionate, a bridge across fractured family ties. Yet from the second he hauled his duffel through the front door, the atmosphere thickened, like adding ink to clear water. Ethan was reserved, a quiet storm wrapped in faded jeans and oversized hoodies. He navigated the space with minimal words, eyes often fixed on the floor, earbuds a constant shield. I made efforts, genuine ones. I quizzed Alex on Ethan's childhood favorites and whipped up pasta carbonara, his supposed go-to. Stuck encouraging Post-its on the fridge. Coffee's fresh, grab some? Offered lifts to campus, though he always waved them off. Meals devolved into rituals of awkwardness. Alex scrolling emails, Ethan offering monosyllables to my questions about lectures or friends. And me? I'd force a grin, ignoring how the quiet clawed at my throat, turning shared suppers into solitary endurance tests. I'd steal glances at them across the oak table, father and son, bound by blood yet orbiting separate planets. How does a home brim with bodies yet starve for presence? Ethan glided through corridors like mist, his footfalls muffled, shoulders bowed under an invisible load. I convinced myself I got it, that our silences mirrored each other. Him mourning a parent ripped away, me lamenting a partnership faded to grayscale. When Alex jetted off for his week-long seminars, his departure barely registered anymore, a non-event in my calendar. But Ethan's nearness? It imprinted, subtle as a shadow lengthening at dusk. We'd collide in the galley kitchen after hours, him in his threadbare tee, me wrapped in silk from a long bath. A nod from him, a soft evening from me, and the air would hum, stretching thin with unspoken layers. He began pitching in unprompted, tossing his towels in the wash, wiping counters after midnight snacks, even volunteering to lug produce from the car one rainy afternoon. Trifles, really, but in a drought of gestures, they bloomed like wildflowers. More than Alex's distracted, "Thanks, hun," after months of radio silence. I resented how it pierced me, how I'd eavesdrop for the gravel in his "appreciate it," how he'd skirt direct gazes yet hover in doorways, as if drawn by the same magnetic pull. From the breakfast nook window, I'd spot him on the rear deck, elbows on knees, lost in the middle distance. What ghost chased him? Did invisibility gnaw at him too, the way it did me, fading into the wallpaper of your own existence? He began pitching in unprompted, tossing his towels in the wash, wiping counters after midnight snacks, even volunteering to lug produce from the car one rainy afternoon. Trifles, really, but in a drought of gestures, they bloomed like wildflowers. More than Alex's distracted "thanks, hun" after months of radio silence. I resented how it pierced me, how I'd eavesdrop for the gravel in his "appreciate it," how he'd skirt direct gazes yet hover in doorways, as if drawn by the same magnetic pull. From the breakfast nook window, I'd spot him on the rear deck, elbows on knees, lost in the middle distance. What ghost chased him? Did invisibility gnaw at him too, the way it did me, fading into the wallpaper of your own existence? Somewhere in those early weeks, my lens on him warped. He wasn't the gangly kid from old photos anymore. I clocked the sharp line of his collarbone, the capable span of his fingers flipping textbook pages. One twilight, as he shrugged off his jacket in the mudroom, something in my chest hitched, a rogue breath, unbidden. I chalked it up to fatigue, but the seed had taken root. After that flicker of awareness, I armored myself in denial. Kept simmering soups, ironing his button-downs, murmuring banalities about the weather. Yet details sharpened. His increasing seclusion, dinners forsaken for the sanctuary of his quarters, the latch clicking with finality. Faint echoes seeped out. Hushed dialogues from a podcast, the pixelated hush of a video stream, a bass pulse muffled by plaster. But mostly an abyss. Initially, I granted him grace. At 21, bereavement ebbs and flows, crashing fiercest in solitude. Still, his withdrawal hummed with evasion, as if he concealed a fracture too jagged to expose. One restless evening, en route to my chamber, I halted at his threshold. A wan luminescence bled under the frame, beckoning like a half-forgotten dream. I lingered, a beat too extended, and then it registered. A cadence, urgent and rhythmic, slicing the stillness. My pulse spiked. Recognition dawned swift and unwelcome. I hadn't schemed to eavesdrop, truly. But instinct overrode, and my fist rapped lightly, courtesy disguised as concern. Inside, chaos erupted. A frantic rustle, the decisive clack of a device snapping closed. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then his timbre. "Yeah?" My throat constricted, words parched. "Just seeing if you're set for the night. Tea? Water?" A hesitation. "Nah, all good." Composed yet laced with that raw edge of exposure, like velvet torn at the seam. I didn't breach the barrier, didn't elaborate. Just pivoted, retreating down the hall, cheeks aflame. That tableau, him, solitary in the gloom, unraveling private tensions, clung like damp fog. It ought to have dissolved into maternal worry or polite detachment. Instead, it stirred a disquietude not rooted in the deed itself. At his age, such impulses are as ordinary as dawn. No, it was the aftermath that ensnared, the dawn meal where he didn't evade. His gaze locked mine, fleeting but deliberate, not shame, not defiance, but a veiled accord, as if imparting a cipher only we could decode. And decode it I did, or perhaps willed myself to, because that undercurrent mirrored my own unrest. No longer mere shared melancholy. Something volatile simmered, alive and perilous. I longed to dismiss the eve's echo, to sip my latte and scroll recipes like any untroubled afternoon. But the pivot had commenced, inexorable as gravity. Over bran flakes and black brew, I dissected that stare. The unhurried lock, the charged hush enveloping us. Touch had evaded me for an eternity. No lingering embrace, no accidental brush of knuckles. Alex was perpetually elsewhere, drained or detached. I'd once coaxed him with lace accents, signature roasts, tentative reaches across cool linens. But rejection's chill hardens you. Eventually, you cease extending. Ethan, though, he registered. In the nuance of a held breath, a subtle lean. I resisted at the outset, swore at ephemeral fancy. Yet famine warps perception. A mere perusal can masquerade as banquet. That fortnight I dawdled in his periphery, sauntering past his portal at odd hours, initiating chit-chat destined for dead ends, savoring the timbre of his replies. Nocturnes found me in gossamer wraps, fabrics whispering against skin. Too muggy for flannel, I'd rationalize, but the deception rang hollow. Truth? I craved visibility, even from this unlikely source. I'd traverse the linoleum with deliberate cadence, aware of his proximity, stooping for a colander in the lower cupboard, conscious of the silhouette cast. Taboo, utterly, yet taboo entwined with a thirst I couldn't quench, intrigue unfurling like embers in dry tinder. What if his gaze drifted anew? What if reciprocity bloomed? I cloaked it in benevolence, nurturing the newcomer, warding off his isolation. But reveries betrayed, turbulent, ravenous, laced with peril. In the witching hours beside Alex's feigned slumber, I'd fixate on that threshold glow, the tremor in Ethan's "come in," the dawn's elusive spark in his irises. Self-loathing surged, yet clung inextricable. Echoes of my youth resurfaced, 18, 24, 28, scrounging affirmation from fleeting admirers who doled it like scraps. I'd believed vows would steady me, forge an unshakable harbor. But echoes lingered. I pursued phantoms still. Ethan bore no fault. He merely existed, and in that resurrected me, a balm insidious and vital. I reiterated my facade of altruism, but midnight replays, the rap, the interlude, the scrutiny, unmasked the charade. It germinated in increments. His appraisals elongated, reluctance to disengage waning. Initially incidental, a hallway graze, a plate handover, then deliberate. One sunrise, as I decanted espresso, I sensed his focus. Not idle, but intent, cataloging my motions like verse. I didn't interrupt. Paralysis gripped, that muted regard roaring louder than symphonies long silenced. I gaslit myself. Optical illusion, nothing more. Until the contacts, a corridor sidle, featherlight, purposeful, fingertips skimming my hip as we vied for the salad tongs, suspending a heartbeat beyond propriety. No utterances followed. Verbiage proved superfluous. Our intermissions thickened, gravid with portent. One twilight, Alex departed for a symposium, bequeathing the abode to us. I proposed a flick, innocent diversion. Plush throw, brimming corn bowls, a light-hearted rom-com flickering on the flat screen. Midway, Ethan inched nearer, reclining his crown upon my thigh as if etched in routine. My vitals stuttered, extremities locked. But peering down, beholding his lashes fan, respiration easing into rhythm, resistance crumbled. Digits ventured, cautious through tousled locks, trailing to trapezius, pectoral, featherweight explorations. He remained statue still, voiceless, permitting the boundaries blur. Realization dawned, my palm's errant path, and recoil hit like vertigo, mortification blazing. Yet as he uprighted, his regard held no reproach, no recoil, merely that tacit empathy, the "I perceive you" that had ensnared me prior. I vowed cessation, erected invisible ramparts. But the domicile's hush mocked, and exhaustion from feigned satiation gnawed relentless. Dawn broke. I drifted to the scullery, still swathed in chiffon, tremors lingering. Ethan preceded me, bare-torsoed against the granite, decanting flakes sans haste. No towel snatched, no evasion. His stare met mine, immobilizing us. "Morning," he intoned, casual as if unclothed norm, as if nocturnal traceries hadn't transpired, as if my arteries didn't thunder. I averted, but his scrutiny adhered to my spine indelible. Thenceforth, friction intensified, every convergence electric. Hallway passes sparked. Tabular silences crackled. Even muteness pulsed with tether, a filament strained to snap. I'd intercept his sidelong vigils. Reciprocally mine strayed. No lark this, primal, unvarnished, perched on precipice. I ought to have intervened, decreed borders, bolted portals, howled halt. Inertia prevailed, for visibility's nectar proved narcotic. Then the tempest descended, sly as fog. Distant thunder grumbled. Forks of pallor etched the casements. Abruptly, oblivion. Circuits severed, appliances hushed, domicile sighing into obscurity. I kindled a taper, its ember a lone sentinel, padding shoeless to the den, respiration shallow. Ethan awaited, perched on the settee, silhouette etched in gloom, wordless. And in that sable veil, destinies intertwined irrevocably, the deluge pattered tentative against panes, crescendoing to cadence. I advanced, taper aloft, its nimbus gilding his contours, cheekbones honed, gaze fathomless. He kindled his own from the sideboard's hoard, match-flaring brief apocalypse. We regarded, unshielded, the interval elastic. I perched opposite, proximal yet prudent. He ignited kin, triune beacons warding the chasm. I loathe this hush, he murmured. Timbre velvet nadir. I inclined. It devours, doesn't it? Another taper bloomed. Not solely silence, he continued, but the phantom throng, presences absent amid assembly. Throat bobbed. Intimately acquainted? We steeped in verity, desolation's bouquet. Precipitation drummed insistent. He reclined, limbs extended languid. Mom haunts me ceaselessly. My core constricted. She cherished you fiercely, I breathed. Affirmation. Yet joy eluded her. As it does you. Protest died unspoken. Veracity stung, amplified from his lips. He averted. Ever since erasure, glimpsed yet unseen? Eyelids descended. Daily crucifixion. Then bridging, his palm enveloped mine, thermal, tender. Withdrawal absent. We fixated on juncture, his pad grazing languid arcs. Gazes ascended, converging, sorrow, yearning, exigency distilled. Proximities dwindled illicit. Lips converged unhurried, exploratory. Query incarnate, unvoiced. His exhalation mingled, vacillation void. Divergence, survey, inhale. Solitude's my enemy now, he confided. And I yielded. Should you teeter on rectitude's brink, the sequel unveils itself inevitable, inexorable. Morn shattered, serene, viscous with unease, atmosphere adrift in our wake. No clatter from Ethan's nook, no hinge protest, no aqueous cascade. Void encroached, oppressive. I tarried in boudoir, fussing linens pristine, tidying vanity inutile. Flesh chronicled, inhalations synced, timbre fracturing, gravity of genesis irrevocable. Venturing corridor ward, fortitude braced, his portals sealed, perhaps fortified. No summons issued. Incapacity bound me. That diurnal charade endured. Brew steeped, vessels scoured pristine, sashes flung to inhale ether denied my lungs. Midday, portal groaned. Alex, premature, valise, thudding foyer, grumbling of derailed parleys, gale-induced reroutes. Nausea roiled, not mere discovery dread, but duplicity's ballast. Ethan sequestered. Paternal hails rebounded from oak, met with frost. Alex arched brow. He's solid? Shrug. Campus crush, squall jitters, hermitage plea. Skepticism flickered, unpressed. Vespertine repast. Duo at board, Ethan absentee. Alex grazed indifferently, digits dancing display, masticating mechanical. Cosmos altered. I alone registered. Appetite fled. Morsels ashen, dermis constricted, cadence clamorous. Normalcy, I implored innards. Respire, flutter lids, persist. Corpus defied, ledger etched indelibly. Guilt manifests insidious. Not clarion, but susurrus, throbbing perennial, epochs elapsed. Ethan entombed. Reciprocated avoidance. Rare intercepts, gazes evaded, sinews taut, mandible rigid. Erstwhile frisson transmuted to malaise, a throbbing absence. Yearning assailed self-revulsion tandem. One gloaming post-vesper, I traversed his lintel anew. Auditory assault, not luminescence, not shuffle, but sobs. Muffled, guttural. Paralysis? Digits danced knobward, denied rotation. Instead, murmur scarce audible. Regrets. Audition? Dubious salvation. Pivot initiated, portal burst. Visage crimson, saline rivulée, ir incandescent. Accusation pierced. You vowed companionship. Latch crashed, cataclysmic. Insomnia besieged post-volley. Ethan's indictment reverberated. You vowed companionship. Agony crested there, for intent was earnest, albeit mangled. Offered not solace, not anchor, not mending affection. Fracture cloaked in haze, bewilderment. Schism solidified eternal. I spectered through domicile, counters burnished superfluous, vestments alien folded. Alex oblivious, equilibrium presumed, nocturnes supine beside him, fantasies ward, unburdened via torrent, rays remnants, or satchel assembled, egress to ether. Stasis prevailed, terror muted tongue, ignominy chained feet. What archetype am I? Scavenging tenderness from the shattered. Query haunted, resounding fiercer than gales. Reveries regressed, juvenile, diminutive, cowering thresholds, craving inquiry into well-being. Pater perpetual absentee mater ira perpetual. Affection conditioned. Veracity risk-laden reticence refuge. Proficiency in masquerade burgeoned, beams amid torment, chortles veiling shrieks. Pursuit veered to facsimile bonds. Aloof, gelid, lacunae riddled. Ethan transcended archetype. Reflector he proved, illuminating interred shards. Peril burgeoned thence, affection, perchance dual lesions propping, mistaking ballast for balm. One siesta, Alex Affield, I confronted parchment quill unyielding. No diversions, no prevarications. Epistle unfurled, chronicles exhaustive, instants errata, sentiments illicit. Lachrymose torrent hollowed, terminus sealed, drawer bound beside nuptial birth. Endurance there, for fortitude faltered, neither conveyance to demolish facade, nor discard authenticity incarnate unspeakable. This fragment lingers spectral, replay amid quiescence, luminance subdued, interrogatives absent, solitary with reticent retorts. Halt decreed or potency ever mine. Ponderance. Fortitude as retreat or candor on desolation's core. Indistinct, for affection's haze conflates solace and avarice. Discernment between desideratum and discernment elusive. Ever navigated such liminality. Rectitude and transgression amorphous in inescapable cloister. If solitude transmutes regard to ardor, if election irrevocable born of exigencies void, unburdened below. Chronicle alternatives, your pivot? My recourse? Narratives entombed in chagrin crave aeration. If attuned, persisting recall affinity. Tales born merit audition. Labyrinthine ilk paramount. Those we dread vocalizing chief. Not all arcana warrant sepulcher. Select peril utterance. That sable interlude, Ethan's and mine, transpired sans conflagration, sans recrimination manifest. No detonation, no avowal, no reprisals tangible, yet transmutation silent, enduring. His scrutiny altered perpetual. Mine, self-word, irrevocably. Affection shuns purity perpetual, shuns lenity absolute. Oft from lesion springs, not luminescence. Genesis in desolation's profundity, that festers unobserved attrition. Solitary cores enact audacity's profoundest. Unrevealed to Alex? Ethan's absolution? Self-clemency? Enigma persists. Certainty. Ballast diurnal, not laurel but contusion, muted caveat that psyche conflates salve and scourge. Perchance absolution inward odyssey, lifetime's accrual from self. But let's rewind a touch, because the story doesn't end in that drawer with the letter gathering dust. Weeks blurred into a monotonous haze after Ethan's door-slammed accusation echoed through me like a fault line cracking open. The house, once a vessel for our tangled silences, now felt like a mausoleum, cold stone walls pressing in, every corner whispering judgments I couldn't outrun. Alex, bless his oblivious heart, sensed none of the seismic shift. He'd pat my shoulder on his way to the den, muttering about quarterly reports, assuming my distant stares were just another bout of empty nest blues, even though our nest had never truly filled. I let him believe it. Lies become lifelines when the truth threatens to drown you. Ethan emerged sporadically, a ghost in his own home. He'd materialize for coffee refills or hasty grabs from the fridge, his movements clipped, eyes fixed on invisible horizons. No more lingering glances, no accidental brushes that once sent sparks skittering across my skin. The air between us had cooled to something brittle, like frost-laced glass. One wrong breath, and it shatters. I caught myself replaying our candlelit confessions, the rain's relentless tattoo on the roof, the way his hand had felt like an anchor in the dark. Not with longing exactly, but with a hollow curiosity. How had we tumbled so far from polite coexistence into that forbidden gravity, only to claw our way back to strangers? One crisp autumn afternoon, with leaves scraping the gutters like impatient fingers, I found myself alone again. Alex at a client dinner, Ethan presumably buried in textbooks at the library. The letter burned in my mind, that unsigned confession mocking me from its hiding spot. On impulse, I retrieved it, the envelope crinkling like dry bones under my touch. ink blurred slightly from a rogue tear I'd let fall during its creation. I read it aloud to the empty living room, my voice cracking on the admissions, the loneliness that had festered like an untreated wound, the way Ethan's quiet presence had felt like sunlight piercing clouds, the kiss that was equal parts salvation and sin. Speaking it freed something, a pressure valve hissing steam, but it didn't erase the stain. That evening, as twilight bled orange across the skyline, Ethan shuffled in earlier than expected, rain-dampened hair curling at his temples. He paused in the archway, spotting me curled on the couch with a forgotten mug of chamomile gone cold. R.E.